Hello, good people of YouTube, Mountbatten here, and today we're going to be going over 5 premium ships that have been power crept since their original introduction into the game. Now, ironically, a lot of the ships on this list actually aren't available anymore for various reasons, but still, in today's World of Warships, they are very much power crept, and if you have these ships, you can probably relate to a lot of the topics I will bring up. But anyway, if you don't know what power creep is, it is when an older ship just gets outshone by either new mechanics or new ships that get added into the game. And in this case, none of these ships are necessarily bad. They have just most definitely lost their edge since their original introduction. The thing that made them stand out and above the crowd really isn't there anymore, because in a lot of cases other ships just now have what these ships originally had, and it's no longer a unique thing to them. And in one ship's case, it's just kind of been shoved into the ground by a lot of changes that Wargaming has made over the past couple of months. But anyway, again, I'm by no means saying these are bad ships. I'm just saying they have most certainly lost their edge since their original introduction into the game. So anyway, let's go ahead and get going with number 5, which is the Tier 8 Premium German aircraft carrier, the Graf Zeppelin. We cannot talk about premium ships that have become either power crept or nerfed into the ground without mentioning the Graf Zeppelin. And man, this is the one carrier that I played a lot of. And the game you're actually watching right now, I didn't do bad. I didn't do a lot of damage, but I had a pretty decent game in it, and I was quite happy for once getting a decent Graf Zeppelin game. So anyway, I could spend 40 minutes talking about all the changes that have happened to the Graf Zeppelin, the universal changes to CVs, well, let's mention a couple of them. Well, first off, they changed the way the dive bombers dive. They used to dive straight down, but now they dive at this weird slanted angle, and when they would dive straight down, that was ideal for the bombs the Graf Zeppelin has. But now they dive at this weird angle that none of the other German CVs dive at. They nerfed the amount of damage that the AP bombs do, which sucked because you would normally get at least one Citadel on a good run setup with the Graf Zeppelin, but now when you do it, it's a shadow of the damage that it used to do. They also nerfed the speed of the planes. They applied a global plane speed nerf across the board, which included Graf Zeppelin, so its planes are fast but fragile. But they took the fast part away from it. I mean, they're still faster than most other planes, but they used to be really zoomy back in the day. Then they also changed the dive speed too, which again messed up the aiming of the dive bombers. And the Graf Zeppelin players have been just doing like parkour to try and keep up with all the changes made to it. And now they're talking about nerfing the rocket planes, which is just another slap in the face to Graf Zeppelin. This ship really does need some love. And yes, it's a CV that I'm saying needs some love. This is by far the worst Tier 8 CV, except for, the Indomitable that has the, 4 planes in a squadron. But, yeah, poor Graf Zeppelin is pretty much now a cruiser with 3 flavors of spotting aircraft, because the secondaries are still great, and that's what makes the ship really is the Mimi secondaries, because with a full secondary ability, you can get the Graf Zeppelin secondaries out to, 9.8, 9.4 kilometers, and they will absolutely tear apart cruisers, destroyers, and even some lower tier battleships. I have a couple of videos of that happening, and it's hilarious when it happens. But yeah, Graf Zeppelin, God help this ship. This is like the one premium that really needs some help on this list if you're listening Wargaming. Alright, anyway, let's move on now down to number 4, which is the Tier 9 Premium American Battleship, the Missouri. So yeah, the Missouri. The Missouri is the coveted credit printer, or used to be, and if you have it, it is still a very good credit printer, do not get me wrong. It's just that since it's a premium ship, it's been passed up for a lot of buffs that the Techline American battleships have gotten. One of the biggest issues is its heel. It still has the old American battleship heel, which wasn't that great. They buffed the American battleships to where now they get an improved heel. It's not a dry dock heel like the British battleships get, but it is a much better heel than the one that the Missouri gets now. What they did was they took the heel that the Colorado got and applied it to the NorCal, the Iowa, and the Montana. But Missouri, because it's a premium ship, didn't get it, even though it was kind of a universal buff to every American battleship from Tier 8 up. Missouri, I guess they considered that the global change wasn't global enough, and it got passed on that hill. So that's one way it's been power crept. Another way is that we've gotten so many more Tier 9 premiums now, to where you can pretty much get pretty darn close to the Missouri's economy. People have claimed that it still has a much better economy than other ships. Yeah, I mean, it's still there. If you get a win in the ship and get north of 100,000 damage, you're going to be looking at a nice pile of credits, but that's true for the Jean Bar, the Georgia, the Pommern, the Alaska. Any Tier 9 ship that you do decent in is going to be printing credits pretty... well, Tier 9 premium ship, I should say, is going to be rewarding you with a nice pile of credits. The Missouri may give you a little bit more, but again, comparing it to the gap that the Missouri was printing by in the day, back in the day, compared to other high-tier premiums, it's not there anymore. Again, it's a little bit better, but it's not really there. And plus, radar, it has radar. It's the only battleship in the game that has radar, so it still has that going for it. But radar overall, the amount of radar has gone through the roof since the Missouri has been introduced. So again, it's not unique in that regards too much anymore, besides just being the only battleship with radar, so it still has that going for it. But yeah, I mean, it's still a good ship. It's still a very desirable ship. Of course, if you're a collector, it is the most desirable ship besides like the OG Belfast. But it's still an in-demand ship, and you can still get it in Christmas containers, and people still spend $100 trying to get this ship in Christmas containers, but it's really kind of not worth it anymore. You know, maybe a year or two ago, yeah, but nowadays, it's like you can just buy a Georgia that's honestly a lot more fun to play than the Missouri and get pretty similar credit income. Again, Missouri's still a little bit better, but yeah, it's kind of just a shadow of its former self, but still a very collectible ship and still a very lovely ship if you do get her, because she is an Iowa, but again, she has the original Iowa heel and not the improved heel, which in today's World of Warships with all the HE spam and the CVs and stuff, that improved heel really helps out. Alright, moving on down now to number 3, we have the Tier 7 Premium British Cruiser, the Belfast. Yes, the OG Belfast. Oh, Belfast. How this ship has become so relevant recently with Belfast 43 being released. But OG Belfast, man, this ship used to be like the ship to have back down at Tier 7 with smokescreen, radar, hydroacoustic search, and Edinburgh with HE with its original reload and not the Belfast 43's reload. This ship used to be tearing it up back down there, and it still can to some degree, but OG Belfast at Tier 7 is really only special now in terms of utility because it still has hydro, smoke, and radar. Of course, that's 3 amazing consumables to have at Tier 7. But in terms of, you know, being an HE spammer and being a BB farmer and a destroyer of DDs, the amount of HE spammy ships has gone through the roof, even all the way down at Tier 7. So it's really not too special in that regards anymore. It really is just an utility now. And again, it's still a pretty desirable ship for that utility, but it's not what it used to be, unfortunately. I mean, with the way the game's changing and the way that the direction that the game's going in, it's really not that special too much anymore. Again, to collectors and to people that like the original ship, the real ship, just like with the Missouri, sure, it's still a very desirable ship, and people still spend hundreds of dollars on trying to get it in Santa containers, but it's just not what it once was. And I'm not saying anything bad about the ship, because of course it's still a fantastic ship. It's a great ship to play. It still has its, it hasn't been nerfed or anything. It just doesn't stand out that much anymore, unfortunately. But anyway, it's still a fun ship to play if you do have it, and if you want to try and get it, again, you can try to get it in Santa containers, but not what it used to be. Alright, moving all the way down now to number 2, we have the Tier 7 American Premium Cruiser, the Atlanta. Oh boy, the Atlanta, the machine gun itself, the OG true HE spammer that, again, is now not that special because, again, the amount of HE spammy ships have gone through the roof. And also the IFHE rework absolutely slapped the crap out of the Atlanta. To now where if you want to be able to pin most ships that you're shooting at, you of course have to take IFHE, but now that cuts your chance of starting a fire down in half. And even then, with IFHE, you can't pin 32mm of armor. And this is in a tier 7 cruiser that can get up to tier 9, where, again, you kind of do need to get over that threshold. Now, you still do have the wonderful DPM of the Atlanta, so if you throw enough stuff at the wall, it'll stick, but again, it's less damage than it used to be able to do, and don't get me wrong, you can still absolutely rack up damage in the ship, especially if you get the opportunity to farm a couple of battleships like what you should be watching right now. But again, it's just not what it used to be, especially after that IFHE rework. And plus, with the amount of CVs around and the changes to AA, its AA has absolutely been dumpstered. And it still does have access to the unlimited charges of DFAA, which is still great, but it's just not the no-fly zone that it used to be. And again, don't get me wrong, it's still a good ship. Its AA is still there, and against less skilled CV players, you will be wiping out their squadrons. But I mean, back in the day, a CV dare not go within 7 kilometers of an Atlanta for fear of losing a squadron for merely insulting the Atlanta by the presence of his planes within his viewing radius. But nowadays, it's just not like that anymore. It's still a good ship. I know several people that still love the ship to death, and it is honestly still a pretty fun ship to play. And it is still ludicrous to see the never-ending stream of HE coming from the ship, especially with the angles, to where it doesn't care if you're behind an island like what you should be watching right now. It's going to catapult those HE shells over. And again, this ship is, of course, a real ship, a historic ship, great ship for collectors, but again, just not what it used to be. And that brings us down to our number 1 spot, which belongs to the Tier 9 Premium Soviet cruiser, the Kronstadt. Oh, the Kronstadt, the very first super cruiser to get added into the game, and quite simply, most super cruisers that have come after it are simply just better. And again, don't get me wrong, Kronstadt's still a fine ship, but one that you can't get anymore, once again, so if you want to get it, gotta try to get it in Santa containers. But it is a pretty tanky ship. It still has its tankiness, I gotta give it that. But in terms of its guns, its gun performance, the accuracy of its guns, pretty much every cruiser super cruiser that has been added since then is simply better. The guns still pack up one heck of a punch, don't get me wrong, but their accuracy is just it's not consistent like most of the other super cruisers. A gear is much more consistent, even though it's nowhere near as tanky. Kronstadt definitely comes out on top there. Alaska's way more accurate. Azuma and Yoshino are much more accurate than this thing. So is Puerto Rico, and of course Stalingrad's way more accurate than the Kronstadt, and of course Siegfried just takes a dump on all of them with its accuracy. In terms of tankiness, though, it is still up there. It's not quite up there with like the Alaska, but it's definitely more tanky than the Siegfried and the Agir, and much more tanky than the Azuma and the Yoshino for sure. So it still has that going for it. But again, the guns just, I mean, it's got some pretty decent DPM on it. But I mean, man, I remember when this ship came out and how inconsistent the guns were, and then all the newer super cruisers came out, and I just never touched Kronstadt again, because why bother with the raginess of the guns when you could play something like Alaska, which has a nice balance of tankiness and consistent guns. Still has that lovely Soviet radar, though. That 12 kilometers Soviet radar, that is still fantastic. Its DFAA and its A in general is kind of a joke. I'm not sure what part of the clip you're on now, but there's several parts in here where the Lexington, a Tier 8 carrier, comes after myself and the Georgia that I'm with. I popped my DFAA, and I think I might have shot down like 3 planes per pass, maybe, against a Tier 8 CV. So yeah, with DFAA, with the Georgia next to me. So yeah, it's not that great. But again, the ship, it's not that it's a bad ship, it's just that every ship that's come after it's just a little bit better, and then the next one's a little bit better, and then the next one's a little bit better, and it's just not what it used to be. Which, again, it's a pretty unique ship. It's the first ever super cruiser added to the game. So naturally, when you move on from that, there's going to be improvements. There are going to be new mechanics taken into consideration, and the original is just not going to live up to the reputation it used to have. And again, think about how often do you see a kronstadt in game? I see one maybe every like 20 or so battles, maybe if that. And I usually take note because it's like, oh look, someone's still playing kronstadt. But again, not a bad ship. And I'm definitely a collector's item, the very first cruiser, super cruiser added into the game. But again, kind of not worth it to spend all that money on Santa containers because, again, simply Alaska is better. Anyway, guys, that's my list. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What would your top 5 Power Crept premiums be? Hope you guys are having a wonderful Monday. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. We are on our way to 20,000 subscribers. Just past 18,600, and I cannot thank you guys enough for that. Hope you guys are having a wonderful Monday, and hope to catch you guys in the next one.